Here are 6 things that I wish I had known to fix in my own work before hiring a professional developmental editor to work on it for me. We are on day 2 of my video series, and today I'll be covering how do I get started. My house is now 3 days without power, so I'm still sheltering with a friend of mine and my 2 feline gremlins. So bear with me and I will find another internet cafe later today to upload this video for you all. Alrighty, my name is Rebecca. I am the developmental editor with Heartbound Editing, and I am back today to share some more mindset tips, practical macro self-editing steps to take in preparing your manuscript to receive feedback, and a bonus author career tip at the end. Let's dive in. Today's disclaimer is that everyone is going to have a different degree of ability, experience, or comfort in critically assessing and meaningfully altering their own work. While this can be learned and improved like anything else, and I do like to encourage people to explore and push their growing edge in new skills, any skill. You do not have to be merciless with your own self-editing. Give yourself grace to keep the bits that you just love and don't want to lose, even if they're not meeting the requirements for your story, and do whatever you can, not the theoretical you the individual, to make your story even more of whatever it is that you want it to be. All right, so mindset tip number 1 for today. Once you've let your manuscripts sit, like I recommended in the last video, it's time to read it. And I do mean read it, not start editing it quite yet. I strongly suggest doing something to change the context in which your brain is connecting to the work that you wrote. And that can be changing the text and the line spacing. This can be reading it on a different device or in a different space, or reading it physically when you print it out. But that can be an unnecessary expense at this stage in your editing. Or my personal favorite is using a text-to-speech software like Speechify, or there are some versions of that built into different people's programs or laptops or whatever they have. Anything to get your brain to more easily consume the material as something else than what it just produced is going to be very helpful in being able to read your manuscript with a slightly fresher perspective. So, regardless, I suggest that you do your best to speed read it start to finish with as few interruptions as possible. The important part is that you change nothing in your first read, not even the typos. I do recommend you have a notebook or a blank document or something nearby so that you can jot down notes in that as you have thoughts, as you notice things that you want to change or add or delete or anything like that. But do it somewhere off on the side. Do not do it in your manuscript. The point of this read is just to consume it in as close as you can do to one sitting. This is going to be vital for you having an accurate understanding of where your manuscript actually is, not just where you intended it to be. And yeah, I can't reiterate this enough. Ignore the small stuff at this point. Ignore the small things. In all of editing, you want to work from the biggest down, and we are miles away from caring about typos. Mindset tip number 2 is that you then let the manuscript sit again for a couple of days. While it's resting, you can make a plan. I realize that this piece of advice is going to work better for people who are outliners, who are planners, and this might be more challenging for people who are more used to pantsing. But I don't mean that you need to make a full outline. I just mean that you take the notes that you've written and you turn them into a plan for how to use those notes. So everyone works a little bit differently. This is great, but there are a few universal recommendations that I would like to make on this topic of making a plan. First, that you collect everything into one place. Everything else. Everything else I'm going to talk about is going to be so much easier if you do this, trust me. Second, prioritize the changes that you need to make and the plot holes that you need to fill and everything else by how big the fix is going to be. For example, I highly recommend moving, deleting, adding, or rewriting whole scenes first, and then go down to any problems that are at the scene level, and then down to the page level and the paragraph level and the occasional mention level. You always want to work bigger to smaller, and prioritizing that on your list is going to be a great first step in doing that. Mindset tip number 3. You can brainstorm fixes the same way that you brainstormed the original manuscript. Whether that is explorative, flow of consciousness, free-form writing, whether that is processing with a trusted friend or associate, whether that is driving with the right playlist going. That's how I come up with all of my ideas. Whatever gets your creative juices flowing for coming up with story ideas, absolutely plan on using that tool to brainstorm your brilliant solutions to whatever problems you find in your manuscript or areas for improvement that you want to bring up to another level. Mindset tip number 4. If you start feeling overwhelmed at any point, make your list longer. Yes, I said longer. I know this seems counterintuitive, but I suggest doing so by taking every list item, every task on your list, and breaking it out into 2 or more smaller points to have on that list. So yeah, your list will get twice or 3 times or 5 times as long as it was before, but you're going to be able to check things off on that list and have that sense of accomplishment of having gotten something done so much more frequently, which is going to make it a lot easier to get through and more rewarding to get through. So, moving on, here are the next 6 steps, which I suggest you take once you return to your manuscript with an editing plan. Just to recap, this is after letting it sit for a week. This is after working on some mindset stuff. This is after everything in the last video, speed reading it once, letting it sit for another couple of days, and making a plan. Here are your 6 steps. These are all questions for you to answer for yourself, honestly, on the page through the story and how you tell it. That disclaimer. Anyway, um, so first, do I have a midpoint shift where something big, ideally connected to the core stakes or the core goal of my primary genre, goes wrong? Again, do I have a midpoint shift where something big goes wrong connected to my core stakes or my core protagonist goals? Even if you can't pinpoint that in technical terms, when you think about your story, can you think of a major, memorable gut drop moment in the rough middle of the story where the protagonist has something go wrong? This is one of the story elements that even a casual reader is likely to notice if it's missing. So even if you can't think of that moment in your manuscript, or you know for a fact you don't have one, I suggest you look at how you could change or add something to have that emotional moment. And I will say that the depth of that gut drop moment depends on your genre. If you're writing horror, it better be bottoming out. It better be as deep as you can make it. But if you're writing, sweet romance, it can be a little tiny blip, but it should be there. So, second, let's put up 3 fingers there. Second editing point for today is the question, do I have any Deus Ex Machina which I need to fix? This is something that readers in the 21st century are likely to loudly, this means in reviews and telling their friends about it, loudly dislike. So let me explain a little bit about it in case you aren't familiar with the term. Deus Ex Machina translates to the God in the machine and refers to a story where, like in the ancient Greek plays, the primary avatar, the protagonist's problems are fixed at the 11th hour when everything looks to be in despair by the all-powerful force, in those cases, one of the gods, the all-powerful force that was absent up to that point, just arriving and fixing everything without the protagonist doing much more than asking or being there or being a believer in order to get all of their problems and all of the problems of the story fixed. Put another way, you can ask yourself, are all of the elements of my climax subtly seeded through the story leading up to this moment as this moment being a possibility? If not, then I suggest that you look at your story overall and name whatever that big magical fix is that happens later in the story, probably around the climax, and just make sure that you're dropping in hints that that is possible, if not anticipated, at least possible, leading up to that point, so that when you get there, it is a surprising but inevitable conclusion rather than just feeling like a cheat code out of the issues that you've built up through the story. All right, third editing tip for today is, does the protagonist or both lovers, if you are writing romance, go through some noticeable change over the course of the story in order to earn their win or their triumph or their happily ever after in the climax, regardless of the genre? Again, does the character go through a noticeable change in order to earn the ending that they get? That is a big part of what will contribute to a reader either finishing a story, feeling amazing, and feeling like they just loved that story, or feeling like something just kind of fell flat and it was a little bit hollow and they can't quite put the finger on why. That is often one of the primary reasons that you will get either of those reactions from your readers, depending on how well you included and executed that particular element. I will say that cautionary stories, stories where your protagonist is a demonstration of what not to do, what choices to not make, which are rare, especially in genre fiction. But I will say that cautionary stories are the exception to that rule. If you're writing a cautionary story, lean as hard as you can in the other direction and make sure that they always double down on the bad decisions that they're making. Just need to get that out of there. So, fourth editing tip for today is, when I read through my own work, do I catch any plot holes or character inconsistencies to fix before getting outside readers? That's pretty self-explanatory. I'm guessing absolutely all of you have already considered that, but I do want to name it so that you can have this conscious intention of catching those every single time you read through your manuscript, no matter what stage you are at, no matter what other things you're watching for. Just have some back part of your brain paying attention to, wait a second, I think that's a plot hole. All of your future readers, whether those are professionals or beta readers or ARC readers or paid readers, like people who bought your book, they're all going to thank you for that. Fifth tip for today. The question is, have I seriously assessed if I am telling one story, or if I am being honest, is it multiple stories which I should split out into multiple books, even if those books are then shorter? Now, this might be the quickest, nope, I'm good, you ever have in the editing process. And that's great, that's fine. But it is very much worth asking yourself for, for several reasons. Okay, so first, many short books in a series are going to be better for your publishing career, indie or trade, as far as I'm aware, than a fewer number of larger books. That's just how the current book industry is working. You want to have more books going out rather than someone buying one huge book and then you don't have anything else coming out for a couple of years. I will say that epic fantasy is an exception to this. If you write a genre where you know long books are expected, ignore this advice. Uh, the second reason to do this, to make this assessment, is it can fix a surprising number of big global macro issues that can be really hard to put your finger on otherwise. if you just split them out, if you reduce the number of love triangles, if you split out some of your plots and subplots and subplots and give everything a little bit more space to breathe and be explored, that can serve your world and your characters and the story you're trying to tell a lot better. So, our sixth and final self-editing question for today is, do I have a strong cause and effect chain connecting all of my major plot moments? Do I have the same cause and effect chain connecting all of my major character development moments? And are those two chains strongly connected to each other, plot and character, wherever I can? Cause and effect chains are a great way to think about plotting out scenes when you're in the outlining process, when you're drafting. If you're pantsing, you can still use that little moment between chapters of going, okay, where's my cause and effect link between these two chapters, between these two scenes, between these two moments, whatever it is. But this is also very, very important to pay attention to in editing. It can be, again, one of the biggest driving factors in holding a reader's attention, how well they liked the story, and making sure that all of your payoffs in the climax and the resolution and all of those moments that you want the reader to feel some version of, oh, that's cool, are going to land in a satisfying way. That's also all I will say about it for now. And that's it for our 6 editing tips for today to get ready for a developmental edit. So the bonus tip for this video is that keeping that cause and effect chain, which I'll explain a little bit more, is, okay, so in chapter 1, XYZ happens. This then creates a chain of events, and this can be blatant and seen on the page, or it can be subtle and in the background and in the subtext. But what happens in scene 1 has to, in some way, cause what happens in scene 2 or impact the core event of scene 2. And then scene 2 has to cause or significantly impact how scene 3 happens. And it's that sort of being able to follow that each thing was caused by the last thing and each thing causes the next thing. That's the cause and effect chain that I'm talking about. I think my sentence got off track. Hopefully that made sense. Yeah, so that can apply to stories, as I talked about in our 6th editing tip, but it also applies outside of our stories. When planning changes, when you're back in those mindset tips and you're planning the changes that you want to make, bear that cause and effect in mind and pay attention to whether the changes or additions or deletions or whatever you intend to make are going to have unexpected consequences down that cause and effect chain. If you remove a whole chapter, you need to make sure that you follow all of the chains of things that affects to their end and make sure that either you take whatever needs to stay in the story out of that part that you're deleting and put it somewhere else so that those chains can hold up, or do something else to make sure that you're not introducing new problems by fixing old ones. And the cause and effect chain can help a lot with that one. So another way that you can use the cause and effect chain outside of these stories themselves is applying it to your author life, to your publishing journey, as well as the stories that you are writing in it. The process of having a finished manuscript all the way through the post-launch cooldown is another cause and effect chain. Choosing the right professionals from your first, which is probably a developmental editor, all the way through your cover designer and your formatter. All of those choices that you make for who to work with are going to impact how your book turns out, not just in the content, but in its appearance, what people see when they are shopping for books. And that, in turn, next link down the chain, is going to affect who buys your book for its entire existence in the world, how many people buy your book, all of these kind of things. And in booking those professionals, you need to carefully plan how long each step is going to take what it can and cannot overlap with on either side, and how much time you need to do whatever it is you need to do between each of those steps. For example, when you get feedback from a developmental editor, you need to schedule time to not only consume their feedback, but then consume your own work again, make a plan for implementing the changes that they recommended that you agree with, and do so, do another check on your book, and then it is ready for whatever your next step is, whether that's beta readers or a line editor or skipping all the way up to a proofreader, whatever it is. You need to schedule these out because it is a cause and effect chain. If one link breaks, if you don't get on an editor's calendar far enough ahead and you get to a point where you're ready to have an edit and you can't find anyone with immediate availability, because trust me, this is hard sometimes, then your whole chain collapses. So pay attention to that in every aspect you possibly can. That is my big, massive bonus tip for this evening. That's it for today. Again, I am Rebecca of Heartbound Editing, and thank you so much for watching. I hope you will follow along with the rest of the series. Today is only day 2, and that you will share it with any other authors who could use some help in making sure that their manuscript is in the best possible place to get a professional developmental edit done on it and get the most they can out of it. Thanks.